Creditors in crisis and subcontractors left in the lurch again. With St Hilliers Construction Company now in voluntary administration, 1,000 subcontractors on jobs in this state and throughout Australia face an uncertain future. Some are stressed out and desperate. This week, the O'Farrell government terminated its contracts with St Hilliers, covering 13 sites. The mainly social housing projects will be completed by Public Works. Today, a St Hilliers creditors meeting in Sydney was told the company and its administrator were trying to trade out. Creditors must wait. Today, St Hilliers creditors came to their meeting with the voluntary administrator with both anger over what had happened and hope that they'd get their money sooner in full rather than later at a few cents in the dollar. Lenny Shurov, a painter and father of four, is owed nearly $400,000 for some Central Coast jobs. He's now at the end of his tether.
My mortgage is maxed to the hilt, my credit cards are maxed out, we've been surviving. I've made arrangements with my creditors and been paying them off so that I'm not trading insolvently, and because I've taken all the responsibility I can for my debt, and I think it should be passed up the line.
It's a bit full at the moment. When it's empty, I know I'm busy.
At his Marrickville workshop, painter and plasterer Phil Martin owed $40,000 for a Sydney CBD job for St Hilliers, reflected on the risky business he's in.
I've been through 3 or 4 of these previously in the last 5 to 6 years, and every time you get stuck in the creditors meeting, you pretty much end up with nothing.
Waste of your time, creditors meetings.
Yeah, that's right. As a subcontractor, you feel almost like you're financing some of these jobs. You work for a month, you work for another month, and then you hope at the end of that you get paid. Sometimes it comes late, and it's very tough by the end of that to meet your commitments.
St Hilliers Principal and Executive Chairman Tim Casey has been in the property and construction game for more than 20 years. Early this month, it called in an administrator when it said its efforts to secure $150 million in additional funding for its subsidiary company's Ararat Prison project, a public-private partnership with the Victorian government, could not be definitively agreed. The corporate veil did not apply, and it could not allow further debts to be incurred without adequate funding. 1,000 creditors, mostly subbies, were immediately left in the lurch. Some New South Wales jobs have resumed as the company attempts to trade out, but this week the O'Farrell government terminated its contracts with St Hilliers on 13 stimulus-funded sites. Under parliamentary privilege, Finance Minister Greg PEARCE let fly.
We've got this St Hilliers group cynically putting their company into administration, putting a company into liquidation to avoid paying their debts, to avoid paying their creditors, to avoid paying their liabilities on a project in Victoria. And apparently the Deputy Leader of the Opposition wants me to continue dealing with these grubs.
We doorstopped St Hilliers Executive Chairman Tim Casey after today's creditors meeting.
I'm not going to comment on what the Minister said. I don't think he'd come outside the House and say the same things. In actual fact, St Hilliers has been a best practice contractor in New South Wales for some time. That's not a political appointment, that's a hard-earned accreditation. My personal view is that I think it's a heavy-handed decision in light of the contracts we've converted with Defence and other state government authorities.
Is your own house and private assets on the line here?
Well, I've sold my house. That was well reported back in December, January, February. So that's been sold. In these times we have sold a number of assets external to the company and within the company. We've exited development projects that we had in joint venture with the likes of Cbus, with Australand down in Victoria, and all of those situations were hard decisions where we took the view that we needed to repatriate the cash rather than sit there and if you like, put our head in the sand and wait for something else to happen.
Can you get out of this?
I'm very confident we can.
And what about that other industry headache, the Reed Construction Group? It has stalled jobs, and disgruntled creditors are still waiting for an expert panel's report by Andrew Rogers QC into claims that Roads and Maritime Services and the Department of Education owe Reed money for work on schools and road projects.
Noticeably, the people are becoming frustrated, impatient and angry.
Debt recovery specialist Glenn Bauer invited us to observe the Reed Group creditors' teleconference on Wednesday. We recreated it. Here, an agitated creditor lets fly at Reed Group director Jeff Reed.
You have income and revenue streams from your mining operation and your assets that you hold, as in land assets. The bank would be after you as hard as we are if you weren't making those payments. The only reason the banks stay away is because you're making your repayments. They've got no reason to call that loan in.
I'm going to make sure they don't have a reason to call it in. Otherwise, they'll ruin this process, and then you won't be paid when the money does flow in front of the secured creditors.
And that's the rub, it appears, for all unsecured creditors. You've got to wait and hope. Glenn Bauer sought an undertaking from Jeff Reed.
You said that you would not allow any creditors to lose their home over this situation. Do you still stand by that commitment?
I intend to, as long as I don't get too badly treated by the government. There's a limit to my assets, but I'll certainly be using them to assist you.
On Tuesday night, Glenn Bauer had a breakthrough. He received 2 cheques totalling over $1 million for 2 subcontractors after wading through the processes of the Security of Payments Act and the Contractors' Debts Act. Thank heavens for the rule of law, eh?
Well, it's worth
Your
this time.
Your clients must be delighted.
They are. They're very good, and it's critical to them. It's just such huge amounts of money to have missing from their cash flow.
The RMS had been forced to pay the subcontractors and could counter-recover from Reed later. Although tortuous, the system works, Glenn Bauer says. What doesn't work is skullduggery, often rife in the construction industry.
In the subcontractor statement, the principal contractor is saying that they have paid the subcontractors that form the claim they're asking the client to pay. Quite often, the directors of these building companies are falsifying those subcontractor statements. We need to expand that subcontractor statement and make the penalties for falsifying such documents much greater.